So imagine this, you've just finished your grocery run, you're sipping your coffee, and you walk into your backyard to find the president of the local HOA locked inside your goat pen, screaming about bylaws, while your prize Nubian goat is chewing her designer handbag like it's a salt lick. That's not a fever dream. That's Tuesday at my house. And somehow, it ended with handcuffs, a restraining order, and the HOA staging what looked like a coup d'etat. Buckle up, because Margaret Peden, the self-appointed queen of the suburbs, picked the wrong farm to invade. So here's the deal. My name's Robert Caldwell. I'm 45, a former software developer who got sick of debugging code and decided to debug life by buying 5 acres of farmland just outside of Metfield Estates. For 3 years, I've been living the dream, growing tomatoes, raising goats and chickens, sipping coffee on my porch like a man in a tractor commercial. What I didn't realize was that being neighbors with an HOA is basically inviting a suburban dictator to try annexing your land. Enter Margaret Peden. Margaret, 62 years old, president of the Metfield HOA for 8 long years, is the type of person who thinks laminated bylaws are a holy text. She's the sort who wakes up at 6 a.m. sharp just to measure someone's mailbox or leave a violation notice for a garden gnome that dares to look whimsical. Her husband, Harold, has the energy of a man who's been defeated in every argument since 1987. I figured her tyranny would stay on her side of the white picket fence. But nope, she set her sights on my farm the minute she realized she couldn't control it. The first skirmish came in the form of letters. Real, official-looking letters on HOA letterhead, telling me my chicken coop violated community backyard structure guidelines. I responded politely, "I'm not in your HOA." Next came a letter about my rooster's morning crow, violating her noise ordinance. Again, "I'm not in your HOA, and also, here's the county's Right to Farm Act." When that didn't work, she escalated to the compost pile, calling it an unsightly health hazard visible from the walking trail. From there, Margaret went full spy mode. I'd catch her peeking over my fence with binoculars. Once, I found her standing on a stepladder like some low-budget National Geographic photographer, snapping shots of my tomato plants. Then came the official complaints. She called the county inspector, who came, looked at my permits, and left chuckling. She called animal control, saying I was running an unlicensed petting zoo. The officer arrived, petted my goats, waved at my chickens, and told her to stop wasting time. But Margaret wasn't deterred. She upgraded to drones. Yes, drones. A $1,500 DJI model buzzing over my property every morning at 7 a.m. sharp. My chickens freaked out. My goats ran in circles like it was the Kentucky Derby. I asked her nicely to stop. She told me she was conducting aerial boundary surveys. On day 3, I introduced her drone to my pressure washer. The remains were very clean. She called the cops, but Deputy Harrison informed her that flying drones over private property could, in fact, be considered harassment. Score 1 for the farmer. But then she got bolder. 6 months ago, I walked into my greenhouse and found her taking photos of my tomato plants. She said she was checking for disease that might infect the HOA's community garden. I told her to leave. She sniffed and declared my heirlooms weren't on the HOA-approved vegetation list. A few weeks later, I caught her measuring my chicken coop with a tape measure at dawn. She mumbled something about setback requirements. I reminded her again that her rules didn't apply here. She sneered and said, "Everything affects property values. I have a fiduciary duty." That was the first time I seriously considered building a moat. The next escalation was her bringing reinforcements. 3 board members with clipboards marched onto my property like it was Normandy, photographing my barn and feed storage. That's when I called Deputy Harrison for the first time. He explained trespassing laws, told them to scram, and suggested I start documenting everything. I took his advice. Security cameras went up. No trespassing signs every 20 feet. Motion-activated floodlights. My place started looking like Fort Knox for vegetables. Did that stop her? Please. Margaret saw those cameras as free headshots. I caught her sneaking onto my property at midnight with a flashlight, poking around my compost bins. At dawn, snapping photos of my chicken run. I built a digital evidence folder thicker than her HOA bylaws. Then she started dragging her nephew along, calling him an environmental consultant. The kid had a clipboard and zero qualifications. They dug around like it was a crime scene. I called the cops every time. Harrison was getting tired of showing up, so he suggested I get a restraining order. Which I did. Margaret fought it, naturally. Claimed she had legitimate HOA business that required her to inspect adjacent properties. The judge barely let her finish before granting me a temporary restraining order. She was banned from coming within 50 feet of my property line. You'd think this would stop her. You'd think wrong. Margaret pivoted to long-distance harassment. She started photographing my farm with a telescopic lens from the road. Hired a surveyor to recheck property lines, hoping to prove my structures were on HOA land. Spoiler: they weren't. She petitioned the county to declare my place a commercial farm. Denied. And then, the pièce de résistance, a 50-page, Metfield Agricultural Impact Report, which she personally distributed to all 200 HOA households. According to Margaret, my farm was single-handedly lowering property values, creating health hazards, and summoning vermin like I was the Pied Piper of rats. She held a PowerPoint presentation at a special HOA meeting, complete with illegally taken photos of my land. Neighbors later told me they were mortified, but too scared to challenge her directly. The woman ruled with a pastel fist. Fast forward to the Tuesday. My phone buzzes with a security alert while I'm at the grocery store. The cameras show Margaret climbing over my fence with a ladder. Behind her, two accomplices carrying what looked like lab equipment. They'd already been there 20 minutes, rummaging through my garden like contestants on some dystopian cooking show. I pulled into my driveway quietly and watched them on my phone as they made their way to the goat pen. Margaret was crouched down, photographing hooves and mumbling about hoof rot. That's when I had my moment. I crept up behind them, waited until they were all inside, then casually closed the gate and snapped the reinforced latch shut. That pen is 8 feet high, heavy-duty mesh, concrete footer, roof included. Built to keep predators out and goats in. And now, apparently, to detain trespassers. Margaret didn't notice at first. She was too busy lecturing her team about diseased goats. But when she tried to leave and realized the gate wouldn't budge, she lost it. Screaming about kidnapping, false imprisonment, human rights violations. Her companions, a cousin and a book club friend, who both looked like they'd been tricked into a multi-level marketing meeting. I called 911, calmly reported that I had detained 3 trespassers on my property, and then I did what any man would do, sat in a lawn chair with my coffee and enjoyed the show. My goats were thrilled. My prize Nubian, Bessie, zeroed in on Margaret's designer handbag like it was stuffed with alfalfa. The others nibbled her shoelaces, sniffed her perfume, left muddy hoofprints on her blindingly white pants. Margaret shrieked like she was being mauled. I sipped my coffee. Pure farm therapy. When Deputy Harrison pulled up, he paused, looked at me, looked at Margaret trapped in the pen, tried, and failed, not to laugh. I handed him the security footage of them climbing my fence, showed him the restraining order, presented my binder of trespassing incidents. Meanwhile, Margaret was shrieking about false imprisonment. Harrison explained calmly that I had every right to detain trespassers until law enforcement arrived, especially when they were violating a court order. Her companions practically melted with relief when they realized the truth. They apologized, saying Margaret told them she had permission to conduct an official inspection. They looked mortified. Backup arrived, and all 3 were processed for trespassing. Margaret was slapped with extra charges for violating the restraining order. As they cuffed her, she shouted about her rights as HOA president, demanded the sheriff, the mayor, the governor. Her mascara was running, her hair was full of hay, and her dignity was goat chow. By evening, it was on the local news. HOA president arrested for trespassing on farm, gets pinned with goats. They aired my security footage. Interviewed neighbors who admitted Margaret had been harassing people for years. The next morning, her mugshot was all over Facebook. Someone made a meme. When you take HOA enforcement too seriously. Thousands of shares. Margaret was suddenly internet famous, in the worst way possible. The legal fallout was swift. She was charged with trespassing, harassment, and violating the restraining order.